Welcome to the Decolonising Education YouTube channel. We've had several conversations about decolonising education, but you can't talk about it without talking to young people. So today we have Kadeem, Maleiki and Nirad to have a conversation about what it means to be a young person of colour within the education system and what are the challenges and opportunities that it affords. So before we start, would you like to introduce yourself? Nirad, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm a geography student who's just finished my final year, and the kind of geographies that I'm interested in are like anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, revolutionary geographies. So I've been really taking the time, having done all my assignments, to really go through the text and understand the method behind what they were doing, behind how we got to where we are.
Brilliant, thank you. Maleiki?
I'm Maleiki. I'm a student at Leicester, but I'm currently in Japan, studying out here and working out here as well. I work with Unity Gym back in Sheffield, and I'm from an area called Broomhall, where we do a lot of activism and just benefiting our community, and it's from us, for us.
Brilliant. And Kadeem?
Hi, I'm Kadeem, 25, from Brent. I'm a community activist and community organizer, and I advocate for unfair labelling of young people. And I'm a PTSD survivor, traumatized by the system.
Thank you. So to start us off, I really just want you to share some key moments in your educational experience that you think have defined where you are at right now. So Maleiki, do you want to start us off?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
So can you tell us about just key educational moments that have just been crucial to what the work that you're doing right now? So is there anything that led up to this point?
Well, from going to a primary school, so I started in primary school. So going from a primary school in my community in Broomhall, 2 minutes from my house, with everyone I've ever grown up with, all my friends, brothers and everything, to go into a secondary school where it's still predominantly my friends that I grew up with, but it got less and less. And then going to a sixth form where it's literally just me and another friend of mine from my community. And then going to a uni where knowing no one. So I've seen a change in how life is in education, from being comfortable with people around you and kind of engage in a way where you know what's going to be taught, to a way where it's completely out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And even going out into Japan, a completely different country, I've kind of seen things in education and how education is structured, which either repeats itself or just completely changes, but never for the right reasons. And we'll probably speak about that.
So what things?
So it's just the way the curriculum is set. And I know this is about the curriculum in itself, but like the way we're educated, the form, like the whole body of education doesn't change. And what is changed is usually just the curriculum. Well, the curriculum is changed, but it's still in that box of guidelines and what has to be taught and what can't be taught. Mm-hmm. And it's not intentional what can't be taught. It's taught from a lens, a specific lens, always, no matter where you are. But yeah, we'll speak about that further on.
So Nirad, you said you're doing your degree in geography. You're just about to finish it.
Yeah.
And you were looking a little bit about the curriculum as well, weren't you?
Yes, actually currently an ongoing project across a few of the departments at KCO is to try and decolonize that curriculum. So I'm working with someone in geography, essentially going through the core syllabus that the core modules that we had to go through, and essentially understanding how we can change them. And it's been very interesting, particularly because the way that they're taught, knowing the people who teach them, in this case, it doesn't reflect how I know them outside of that module. It's kind of very set within this parameter for no real reason. For different reasons. And yeah, definitely a lot of my experiences were around just before I started university and throughout university. That's where I've learned a lot about different things.
What was your experience like at school?
My school experience was, I guess, a bit different. I went to a very old private school in Birmingham, and there I never really I always enjoyed, like from when I was young with my mother, like always enjoyed reading, So throughout then I was always enjoyed the reading aspect, but I never really, being in that environment, which was predominantly Asian, it was just, it was a whole set of things. And my school experience, as I got to the end, there was a lot of, it was kind of those events when I started into sixth form, around the elections, around some referendums. And that kind of really just started to challenge what was before like a very sheltered kind of worldview.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Kadeem? What was your educational experience, and how has it informed the work that you do now?
Well, it's kind of dictated every decision I've made in my life, basically. Feeling bullied by my teachers, obviously, because from nursery, I was on the SEN register. So from my first engagement with education, I was indicated to have some type of disability. And by 6, I was being targeted by my head teacher. And I remember one specific memory. Well, there's loads of them, but this is not something that I ever forget or I ever let slip my mind. So I was in reception, and the teacher was covering the lesson. The head teacher was covering the lesson. She was the substitute teacher, but she was the head teacher. And obviously in reception, you're not doing any serious work. So we were just colouring pictures and just doing some colouring in, and yeah. So I got to the end of the day, and the bell had rung. And everyone got up, but me, I just took a bit longer to do things, and I was finishing off my picture before I got up. But she took it upon herself to pick up the picture and just rip it down the middle. Obviously, I'm a 6-year-old kid, and it's like this lady was like the black version of Miss Trunchbull, like, literally. And in fact, she actually got caught stealing money from the school some years later. So yeah, she wasn't a very good character. But yeah, that was an experience that really kind of dictated how I looked at anyone in authority, because I didn't get angry. I just left the school. I walked out the school as a 6-year-old and walked 20 minutes home. And they tried to call my mum and say to her they don't know why I've left the school. They don't know what's happened, basically. And like, yeah, it was just an uphill battle from there, because from there, the next school that I went to, obviously now I'm a cause for concern now, apparently, and all this other stuff. So yeah, like, it was just pressure, observations, and education constantly, having to sit at the front of the teachers, having to sit right in front of the teacher, just things like that, like never feeling any type of, never being able to be myself, basically. So yeah, I became oppositional. And I say it like that because I wasn't. The system made me hate it. So yeah, the diagnosis eventually came, and I kind of made it my mission to kind of do this type of work. And yeah, whatever prompted me into this, it was obviously a godsend. So I'm just grateful to be able to share some of my experiences. Obviously, I've got a large catalogue, but that was the defining moment in my mind for what kind of set everything in play afterwards.
Yeah. And can I just go back to the comment that you just made now about saying you became oppositional because the system made you that way?
Yeah.
And I think that's just such a really powerful point to make, that children don't go into school with these labels. They're given these labels by the system, and it can have like a long-term impact. The idea that you're presented as oppositional, or whatever the terminology is used, as a 6-year-old, and how that carries on throughout your education system is just crazy.
Yeah, 100%.
Have you guys had any experiences of challenges with teachers or with the curriculum that you've tried to air your opinion, or you try to air your thoughts and you face resistance?
This is a bit funny. I remember in history, and this is the time I used to go on Instagram and follow all these teaching the new history pages and stuff. So I came across a picture, and it was like of Caesar Borgia, and they were linking it to Jesus, for example, and saying it was modeled. This picture of him was modeled after Caesar Borgia, etc., and it was used as a image to etc. All that kind of stuff. So in history, we used to do this thing where the first 10 minutes of the class, you put your hand up and say something about history that you learned. And I think I was just trying to, I don't know, I was just trying to say what I learned from the Instagram pages. But it was like, it was dismissed. And that was my first case of knowing that not everything will be taught in the classroom, you know? So yeah, that's just one of them. And how it was, yeah.
So you tried to make a point about something that was actually in the curriculum, but it was dismissed.
It wasn't in the curriculum. It was extra knowledge about, like, just during the Medici times and everything. So it wasn't going to be taught in the curriculum anyways. And it was like, just, you always mention something interesting in that history class, and he usually speaks about it for a good 5 or 10 minutes. But mine was quickly dismissed. And then that's basically, I'm just trying to say, that's when I first realized not everything in the classroom and in history will be taught. And education, like, there's more than just like school education, you know?
So let's talk about that. What other types of education are there? What other types of education have you experienced that isn't within the school space?
So you can go from the most basic ones. Have you seen like tweets and stuff about photosynthesis hasn't taught me how to pay my taxes, you know? So there's the simple ones from that level where it's basic things that you're not taught and usually you learn in adult life and everything, to things that completely contradict the history that you're taught in classrooms. And like the lens that is worn to teach is from a lens that isn't familiar with you or your background or your history, you know? So it's like you're forced to look out of this window to kind of just say yes to everything you're taught, you know?
Yeah, so it's not relatable.
Definitely not relatable. And there's a lot of things where you can bring up, but it makes people uncomfortable because it breaks down who their hero is, you know? It completely breaks that down. You're only taught, for example, Winston Churchill. He's a hero for the UK. Fair enough, he won the war. And as British people, Winston Churchill was a leader, right? But if you think about Winston Churchill, and who was that? Okay, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Who was our enemy in World War II? Who was our enemy? Hitler, right? Hitler was a malicious guy. He was evil. No one likes Hitler for what he did, right? No human deserves to go through what Hitler's done, right? But like we're taught in history books, his main reason for this was to make the Aryan race prosper, right? But if you think about it, Winston Churchill had a Aryan complex as well, like a massive Aryan complex. In fact, Winston Churchill himself said the Aryan stock is bound to triumph when they were colonizing Africa, you know? So they had the same incentives. And then from history, they're taught that it's just like a comic book, like the winner, the loser, but you never realize the people that write the history are usually the winners. And it's usually things which we're not taught, which is mainly economic means, you know, and gaining power. Instead, we're directed in a way where it's like for the common human good. When it never really is that. They never have other humans' best interests at heart, you know? So like history in itself being taught in school is just, it's funny, you know? There's so many, you can draw comparisons to two completely different people, a hero and a villain. Yet you can't say that in a classroom because you're either being not racist, you're either just trying to cause controversy, you're supporting a certain person. They love to change the narrative. And when I say they, I mean they as in those who teach the curriculum. And for them, they have a they. And those they have another they. So it goes up and up. But you won't ever learn that in a classroom. Never. Because what that teaches you is what is really happening in the world and what the reasons are. We're taught in a way where it's a fairy tale, where it's a comic book, where there's an ending, you know? But there's never an ending because history's been repeating itself. And we can see right now history is still repeating itself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys think, Nirad, Kadeem?
I mean,
Yeah, I agree. It's a day system, and it's teachers versus students. Like, but the teacher can never be wrong. So it's not an even playing field. And where young people are supposed to kind of like young people are the future, or you know, school is for everyone, but it's not inclusive. And there's some people that obviously get left out or kicked out or made to not feel like they could be equal, better, equal or better than another person. And obviously, I just feel like that creates the wrong perceptions in someone's mind. And yeah, some people act negatively on that, and some people don't act at all, end up with depression. And I don't know, like there's the outcomes for an excluded person are not normally favorable. And the way mainstream primary school was for me, I don't know about mainstream secondary, but the way mainstream primary was, nothing I said had an ounce of truth in it. Nothing I said was like me regarding my own emotions, or if it was me regarding my own emotions, I had emotional behavior disorder. So I don't know. And even then, even with all of the support, or not support, even with the engagement I had with the local authority, the care wasn't continued, and there was no long-term plan. There was supposed to be, and this all stuff I'm learning now about my mistransitionary meeting and all this stuff about me never really being cared for apart from just transportation to Peru. Like it's gut-wrenching. It's gut-wrenching that it's still happening, basically.
Yeah. So when we're talking about decolonizing education, and this is like includes curriculum, but it's beyond curriculum because it's about decolonizing the whole system. What is the role of young people? What should be the role of young people? Because at the moment there isn't, the voice of young people isn't there, and they're not asked to participate, and they're not taking the lead on this, or they're not given the space to take the lead on this. So what role should they be playing?
The young people I've spoken to, sorry, bro.
No, sorry, bro. Go ahead.
No, just the young people I've spoken to, they're not hopeful of any like realistic, like drastic change. That's where it is. They don't believe anything can change. So unless they're a part of that and see it for themselves, like what I've been like, what like me myself putting myself at the forefront of the issue to understand it. Like some people aren't willing to do that, or so that I think the empowerment of and building someone's sense of self is kind of the key to them feeling valued and wanting to take those battles of inequality further.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so that is 100%, and it kind of links to what I'm saying is, do you know the classroom and the classroom schools that like I've been to, I don't know about everyone else, represents the rest of the world. And that's the problem, because we're in a classroom with people from different economic backgrounds, different classes, like different races. That is the world that we're in. And it's in the classroom because the person to the left of me is from Asia, and the person to the right of me is from, like, especially being in Japan with people around the world from South America. And the fact that we can get along so well, that is the problem, because the reason I feel like we don't have a voice is because we can see that for what it really is, for being in the classroom. But then once we leave school, then gender pay gaps come in, like racial discrimination in jobs. And then it's sorted into who you are and where you're supposed to be. So I think that's when they let you have a voice, because your voice is shaped, because you are the people you're around, right? But if your voice is given to you in a classroom, you can't see what the media is telling you about Muslims because the person next to you is Muslim and you guys are laughing at the same thing. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like it's giving young people a voice will just reflect how the world should be and how, like, the positive side of globalization. Do you get it? But I don't think that will work, man. They'll wait till everyone's. So
do you guys feel like so I don't want to put words into your mouth, but do you feel like one of the few places where your voice is actually silenced is within the education settings?
Definitely.
Like, do you feel like that's like the one place where you feel silenced?
Yeah, 100%. You're put into a uniform, you're put in these corridors, you stick to the left side, you sit down, you learn what everyone else is learning, you try to remember it. If you don't remember it, then sorry, in society, you don't fit in at that top. Get to the bottom, do you get it?
Yeah.
That's exactly how it is. It's basically, this might be an extreme word, but it's brainwashing to another level, which
some might say you're just conditioned. So like, social conditioning from a very young age.
That's how I ended up oppositional.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Pavlov's dog, you salivate when you smell the food. when the teacher gives you praise for like knowing what you're supposed to learn and not trying to defy, that then is rewarded. But when you start asking questions and defying, you're not going to get that food. You know what I mean? So it's interesting.
And if your lived experience or your visible representation isn't in the curriculum, then you're going to ask questions. So it's a no-win situation.
Exactly.
Stay silent and you're invisible in the curriculum. If you say something, then you're being oppositional or you're being challenging and confrontational.
Definitely. Look at the images in history books when they're talking about Africa. Look at the images. That'll tell you all of that.
Yeah.
They made me watch Roots in school.
Really?
I swear to you.
Oh God, Nirad, what about you? What are your thoughts?
This is who you are. Watch this.
And then I done a therapy session afterwards.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's funny.
All provided by the school.
But then
so
again,
they know what they're doing essentially. Then
Nirad, my education experience was very similar to yours in the sense that I went to a very multicultural, diverse primary and secondary school, and my college, to be honest, was quite diverse as well. And then for some reason I went into university and there were only 2 other people of color in the entire lecture with 200 people, and we just gave each other that nod to be like, we're in this together now. There's nobody else here with us, we're in this together. But that was the biggest shock for me, and that's when I started to become more aware of the systemic issues. What was your experience of going to university, and how did that change your experience, your thoughts on education?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to what you said before, we as young people have to be at the front. There's no two ways about that. If we're at the front, that also means we're not we're able to interpret what's going on around us for ourselves. And for myself, a key moment actually before I went to university was I had the chance to go back to Jamaica and spend time with my grandparents. And while I was there, I was able to really come to terms with a part of my heritage and come to terms with it in a way where, for me, reggae music was a way that I was politicized. Like reading Marcus Garvey from one of my essays was a way that I was politicized. So being able to go to the Marcus Garvey Museum in Jamaica, it then set me up to have an understanding that when I went to university, that yes, there's a curriculum, but that curriculum is so small compared to what can be taught. And within my course, it became very segregated. Even though a lot of the people I'm friends with are Black and brown, there's a very clear and visible separating of other people from us, whether it be at the lectures or even outside. And that's particularly apparent when we're based in London, because it's hard. It requires effort to do that. But I think from what I got from your question, I was thinking about how someone that I came across in my first year was Cedric Robinson, a really key thinker to me. And just being able to investigate his work, having the university as kind of a framework, but not the purpose for which I was reading his work and engaging with his scholarship. That was really important, and it's kind of framed how I've proceeded since. Always kind of been adjacent to that university space.
Yeah, and I really like that point you made about being adjacent to the university space. The idea that we learn in school, college, or university, but there's always supplementary education that we need to have as well, because there's something that's missing, and wherever you get that from, you need it. So you do that extra work to find that education.
Yeah, and if people are interested in that, two things I would recommend would be The Undercommons by Fred Moten. The Undercommons being a way of visualizing not a physical space, but a whole kind of region where radical scholarship is done, not just in the university, but it depends on where it is. And for people who are interested in reading into Black geographies, someone called Catherine McKittrick has written a lot in really interesting ways about you have this representation of space, but with not even beneath that, but around it, you have all of these different processes going on. And it's important to pay more attention to the processes going on, because that's ultimately where you find your people, you find your space.
Yeah, that's a really important point, and I love the fact that you've just quoted the undercommons, because it's a hugely important like text for anybody that wants to try and do like resistant work. And this feels like it's resistance work, because you've got a whole system that is like held up against you, trying to hold you in place, and everything that you do to try and challenge it is labeled as resistance, and you can't take yourself away from that.
This is it's I'm so thankful that now this is a topic of discussion, because like I felt like a lone soldier so much that I actually gave it up. I thought I shelved all my trauma, and I was ready to not be oppositional. I was masking for 7 years. I didn't realize that these terms and all these things that I was doing to try and fit in, like I didn't understand. And as well, I went to university. I was trying to study computer science, but probably wasn't the best thing for me to do.
I did the same thing for GCSEs.
Oh God.
I've
done creative media, games design, and me being me, I like to know everything. So I wanted to learn the programming side of it as well, but it's just too much implementation. I'm a creative, so I kind of faced those issues with uni, so I had to stop. That was the first thing I kind of threw in the towel and just said, you know what, I can't do this, or I can't do this. I reached some, like, one of my limits basically. And like even then, so I still went into employment, and was working 5 days a week, and like really undervaluing myself in a sense, because who knew about this work, all this transformative justice work? Who knew about all of this? I didn't. I didn't even know my own diagnostic criteria. So,
and you know what? There is something to be said there. There is something to be said there about self-knowledge and empowerment. Exactly what you said earlier, because a lot of the times the people that are doing this work have gone through the system, and the system has failed them, and they've had to do that work, and it takes a long time. They've had to do that work of actually name the way in which the system has been violent, and actually name it, so you can separate it from yourself and say, this isn't about me, this is what the system has imposed, and this is what the system's done. And when you slowly remove all of those different obstacles that have been put in front of you, then you're left with who you are. And once you're left with who you are, then you can move forward and actually do work. And Toni Morrison's really amazing at this, because she talks about the fact that racism is a distraction. And she said it's designed to be a distraction. The way that it functions as a system is designed to put lots of different things in front of you, so that you're spending all of your energy and your time, emotional and intellectual labor, trying to justify your right to exist.
It's a simple war tactic. You can see it like in a lot of books that talk about war and strategy. It's always confusing, and it's always giving them a lot to chew on, and it kind of makes it unclear. Can I just say what Kadeem is doing? I've not seen anyone do. Do you know how powerful it is to go back into your documents and see what they've done wrong, and see and then make them realize it. No one digs back, because it's a dangerous thing to do, to dig deep and look back at what they've done wrong, because I've not seen anyone do that.
Because it's trauma. It's trauma. You're unpacking trauma, and that's painful.
My thing was, I'm gonna show you. That's my thing. I'm gonna show you. I've got all my schoolwork from reception upwards. I've taken, because I'm a bit of a hoarder. So I always had this plan. I'm being like so serious. I always had this plan, and I just didn't know how I was gonna do it. And like the police, that situation, that referred me back to who I actually am, basically, because I didn't have any confrontations with anyone after leaving school, because I wasn't in interaction with any teachers that would be trying to enforce like things on me that I didn't choose to do, because obviously with college I got a choice to do what I wanted to do, and it's like that would have made a massive difference, like just knowing all of your options. And that's the thing with me, if I don't know my options, then how can I really make a long-term plan and something I can personally stick to myself? Fair enough, you've got professionals doing it for you and they want to be support workers and stuff, but I haven't heard from my SCN support worker in 14 years from when I got put in the crew. So I didn't even know this lady's name. I searched her up the other day. She's still on LinkedIn. I want to send her a message, but I'm not going to do that. I'll wait for her to see my name somewhere and see if she even knows that I was one of her cases. And that's the next thing, because I'm going to get to where I want to go, and everyone that has been in those places, I just like it's my responsibility to voice my opinion and not be silenced, basically.
Yeah.
Can I just say?
Go on, Maleiki.
Can I just say, do not ever listen to your careers advisors or anyone in that sector. I'm telling you, no, like for real, if they don't do what's best for you, they do what's gonna work for them, and see, like, they give you advice as to what will work rather than what with hard work you can do, you know? Say your grades are 3 C's, but you want to go for something where they'll recommend for 3 A's. They'll tell you not to, because it'll just look like they gave you the wrong advice, and they want to do their job right. So
I had to do a foundation paper. I was locked on a foundation paper. I couldn't get any higher than a foundation paper, and I didn't know this the whole 5 years I was in school. I didn't know I was training for foundation level until I actually done my exams.
Yeah.
You see how they put you on a box?
Yeah.
Aspirations
And you know what? Since we're talking about labels, one of the things that really frustrates me as somebody who was a youth worker and is an educator is when we see young people like yourselves excel, and we know very well what the system has done, you now get labels of like, you're resilient, you're excelling, you're exceptional, you're the one who made it. Do you know what I mean? And then the onus is still on, right, the system doesn't need to change, because there are some people who still succeed because they just have like their own inner strength, and it takes the attention away from, these are people that are surviving despite what the system has thrown at them. Instead of recognizing that, we're putting them on this pedestal of, like, I'll give you an example. When I started my job at the university, everybody was talking for about a year about the fact that I was the first Black teacher in the department. Seriously. And I had students coming up to me going, I've gone through my entire education system and you're the first Black teacher I've seen. And I thought, you know what, that's not something that I should be proud of. And that's not something that anybody in this department should be proud of. I never want to be the exception, because that tells me that there's something failing in the system. This isn't about me.
Oh my God. I was the only person to leave my crew, or we was the only age group that left with GCSEs. And like, I don't know, like that gave me confidence to want to not be oppositional. And then like being like someone who should have been heralded, and my local authority should have wondered what college I went to, and they should have wondered about how I progressed, and that I didn't end up in jail, like what, or not at that point anyway. But yeah, like my local authorities, they just never cared about me, and I felt it. And like, still, like, even being that person, the courts decided to not make any not respect my protected characteristics, and that was just a gateway into the criminal justice system when I actually had not been receiving support for 14 years and put in a real position of distress. But again, it's just criminal behavior, and it's I don't know, like, but I don't like people making me act out of character, and I need to that's something that needs to be rectified, because everything I've read since about the police wanting to help vulnerable people and everything I've been involved in indicates that they're trying to produce like people with my mindset, basically, innit? So why am I getting labelled as a gang member? Because that was the next thing. I'm a habitual knife carrying gang member involved in recent shootings on my borough, when I haven't been stopped and searched with anyone, and I got one offence at the time. So it's like, how have they still managed to create this narrative to someone who, by the local authority, I wasn't allowed to be in my community to make those connections, and I didn't go to a mainstream school in this borough. in this postcode, so I don't really know anyone here, and I've got social and communication problems. So how do I become a gang member? But I don't know. It's just I don't know.
So a question for all three of you: what is the role of trust in doing decolonizing work? Like, what role does trust play?
Massively, because like I said before this was recording, trust gets things done, you know, because like I was saying, and I've said many times before, in my community, there'll always be organizations that will come in. They'll help for a month, 2 months max, and then disappear. So it's like that detachment they have with the community. So you don't really trust them. So when new people, and there was like, some of them would often see someone doing wrong and call the police, and then they'd get labeled by everyone else. Do you get it straight away? Whereas, for example, Unity Gym has been there with everyone. They are everyone. Do you get it? And that trust is built. And look how much things they can do. They can call upon any young person to talk about what they need to, because there's that level of trust. So with trust, and especially like linking that to education, with trust, when you trust what you're learning, you learn more. Because if you don't trust what you're learning, you doubt more. Do you know what I mean? So trust is one, like trust alongside many other things has to be there. You know? For example, like what you were saying, when you were applauded as the first black woman in your department, it's like them saying, well done, like clapping, well done, look what your hard work got you, but not sorry for our mistakes that made it harder for you to even get to this position. Do you know what I mean? And so you can't really trust them in the long run because they're congratulating for their mistakes. It's like not owning up to your mistakes. Can you trust someone that doesn't own up to their mistakes? No, we're not.
No.
So it's just like that within the system.
Exactly. So what needs to happen for people that are saying we're committed to doing decolonizing work in education? How do they prove that they can be trusted?
Look around them. Simply just look around them. Who's funding them? What was their funding bid? Who did they use? How long has that person they used to help fund that bid been in their organization? That young people, speak to young people in that organization. Try not to have a bias. Why did they come and speak? Oh, were they offered gift cards? Cool. We don't trust this person.
Gift cards.
Again, yeah. That's a lot. You'll get a lot of people. Yo, you want JD £25 gift cards, and then people be like, yeah. Do you know what I mean? But like, if you look deeper into who they are, who they're surrounded by, and what their intention is, like you can't really see someone's intention unless you observe them. So just watch, just keep an eye open. It's hard. There's a lot of weird people that want funding for whatever. You know, like you said, that teacher that ran off with the money in your school. She was a teacher. She was in a position of trust, but money was her motive at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%, and ruining people's lives as well.
Exactly.
So trying to.
Exactly. You need to hire people like Kadeem that will dig into their stuff 10 years ago. And then
Police,
pull out the
school,
roof,
council, everything. I'm on all of them right now.
Right.
Yeah, and to be honest though, that's real. So in the education system, we don't have the representation that we should have in terms of diversity. Everybody knows that. And on a level of just having teachers, let alone senior leaders and head teachers. So the vast majority of our teachers in schools are white. What is the role of trust in doing decolonizing work with teachers that don't look like you?
Does anyone want to answer first?
To be fair, yeah. My experiences, it was actually the black teachers that were treating me worse. I'll be completely honest. It was black head teachers, in both of the primary schools that I went to. The one that ripped my picture, was black head teacher. And yeah, like a black police officer that I'd say assaulted me outside of my address, but they'd say I was resisting and obstructing, but that's normally the recurring pattern for me. But yeah, I don't like that's a difficult one for me to answer, because the discrimination I felt has been not color specific. And that's more hurtful, because I do this work to actually like make sure that we're getting treated properly, and it's emotional still when I think about it.
So is the mistrust from people that work in systems rather than who they are and what they represent? Is it the fact that they work within systems that creates that mistrust?
Yeah, because like you were saying, race, to an extent, it's like true. You need someone that kind of looks like you to help you. But I've got, like, for example, Will, Dr. Mason, Andy. They're white males, right?
Yeah.
But they have a lot more trust than, I'm not going to say names, but people who've worked in my community that are black.
Agree. Absolutely.
Because they do this thing where they try to overcompensate for their white counterparts and do more than they're supposed to. And this in turn just turns them into Uncle Toms, you know what I mean? Where they try to impress and prove that they deserve to be where they are, when that's an insecurity in themselves.
Yeah.
And then people that look like them don't trust them, because you can't trust someone that's trying to impress. I'm going to use the word massa. Yeah, because you can't trust them. They're going to do what they can to secure their position. And you need to watch out for people like that. Whereas people like Will and Andy, and I can probably many other white people who actually care about the problems that we're facing, they've been in those communities. They've kind of grown with them. So like I was saying, it's a fine line. It's hard to kind of distinguish between the two, but there's definitely a disparity there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think on the one side, obviously, for purposes of diversity, we need to improve representation just so that the classroom looks like the world, like you said, Malachi, and the teaching staff need to look like that as well. Just for purely that reason in terms of diversity, but in terms of doing the work and creating that trust, like you said, your skin folk aren't always your kinfolk. So there's like a phrase that says that people that look like you are not always for you. And where you get support and where you build trust can come from anywhere. It's just about people that are proving that they can be trusted. Nirad, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel like that question decolonization is a struggle. So you have to be constantly in a struggle and recognize that that's what it is. Decolonizing. We have to decolonize because colonization is still happening. So if your means of decolonizing are through funding, that's highly suspect. I think with trust, you have to work from an understanding that we are all we got, whether that's yourself, the people around you, your ancestors, people yet to come. Like that's what we've got. And then I guess thinking about trust, this comes from like my stuff with abolition is about thinking about solidarity rather than just empathy, because empathy reproduces this thing where I have to see myself in you, and that's a really valid thing to do, especially when we're talking about our relationship with white people, because then it requires us to have a certain level of almost innocence. So that aspect of solidarity is really key, and that's something that we can learn from other circumstances, because it's not just us in this case who are decolonizing. So,
that's a really important distinction between solidarity and Malachi, sorry, what were you going to say?
Do you know what's interesting that he said about solidarity and empathy? Like, I didn't really think of it in that way. Whereas empathy is looking like someone because you can relate. I didn't realize. I just want to pick on that. It's true.
I got a quick point about that as well, actually, because that was actually one of my behavior strategies. I lacked empathy. And it was the white teachers telling me I lack empathy. And I just now looking back on it, it's like I'm over empathetic. I don't lack any empathy at all. I relate to most people, and I probably shouldn't, because that's what lowers my guard.
You want to know something interesting? Yeah, in Japan is the most I've ever felt British. Being in Japan.
Really?
I'll tell you why.
Tell us about that. Why?
I'll tell you why. I live with people from Brazil, Mexico, Denmark, like just all over the world, from the US, Australia. And there's people from the UK that's not at my uni. They're like from Kent and things. And when we're together, they make a joke where it's like, oh, all the Brits are together, and they'll always be like, oh, Malachi, this is such a British thing. Like, do you know what I mean? They're trying to. They find, because not everyone else in groups, the Spanish girls are speaking Spanish, the French guys speaking French. And then when we're speaking English, they see that familiarity in me, that empathy thing. They see the English in me. So they're always like, they'll like, from the beginning when no one knew each other, they'll come and try to like sit with me and speak with me and things like that. And it's super interesting because back home, it's like, all right, now they have someone that looks like them. Now we're in Japan, we have someone that is kind of like us because we're from the same place. And they see me as fully British. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, so it's just it's about the connections.
It's super interesting.
That is Nirad, did you find that, because you said you studied in California for a bit. Was it California? Yeah. Did you find that as well?
I was at Berkeley, which is in the Bay Area, which is, I mean, at Berkeley, one thing that was really interesting that I haven't researched into properly was the Third World Liberation Front, which had its 50th anniversary while I was there. And that was the whole movement behind, or that was an extension of the Black Studies struggle. But there, what was really interesting, bearing in mind what he said, whenever I was around like people who were like from the valley or like rich, like people who came from a more wealthy background, I was always British. But when I hung out with friends who were Black and brown, especially because at Berkeley those were such small communities, I was always Black and brown first. And for me, it allowed me to become more critical of Britain, of that whole identity, not just as a nation, because I saw how people would look to it depending on how they want to see you. So there was that difference, that slippage between different groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I want us to finish off on is, so we've talked a lot about how violent the system is, issues around trust, the things that have made us put our guards up and have framed and changed who we are in order for us to do this work. I want to have a conversation now about self-care. Like, what do you guys do, and what did you do when you were in those systems to look after yourselves? Because it takes a lot of strength to make it out the other side. And if you don't have support networks and things around you, and you may have had support networks around you, but if you don't have that strength comes from within. So I just really want to know about what you did as part of your self-care and what you continue to do now.
I got addicted to online games.
Okay.
I got addicted to online games. So yeah, that saved me from a lot of stuff, problems in my area, and just a lot of stuff, like just loving role-playing games. And like eventually going on to study game design, like that was obviously my thing.
And you're a creative, so that makes sense.
Yeah, proper. I need to get back into it.
What about you, Maleiki?
I just, through interviews like on YouTube, I'd watch like interviews from celebrities and stuff, and then I'd always get to these interesting people. For example, I didn't know Dick Gregory until I watched Power 105 and his interview on there. And I was like, oh, this guy's interesting. Let me see what he's saying. And then I'd go from interview to interview. I'd see how people are working. Kanye West, that's one guy that was interesting because it's not about me supporting his views. It's about how hard he had this delusion where he will be successful. And I was thinking where it came from and things. So I'd look into it, and then they'd mention books they read. Jay-Z would mention books he's read. And like, I'd go into books, and then I'd like order books. I wouldn't read them. They used to be there for decoration. Like, yes, I've got this book, so I'm like this person now. And then here and there, I'd get bored, and I'd open a page and I'd read it, and I'd be like, this is interesting. And then I tried to get into like online businesses and stuff, which I did one when I was 16, where I'd buy and sell from eBay to Amazon, where I'd take the pictures. I would never have the products, and I'd just post them and say I'm selling this, so somebody would buy it. Then I'd find a cheaper one, and then I just use that address and send it to them using their money. So I used to just do that kind of things, and then it got me into more books in that level. And it's literally just through like reading and watching interviews. And then I had and then I had Unity Gym, obviously, in my community, always having my brothers around me. Do you know what I mean? So it's a lot of things.
Well, Nirad, what about you?
Not so much when I was in school, or not even, and I find it definitely harder to do when I'm got a lot of stuff to do with like school, university, but I really enjoy music. Not that I make it, but especially because looking back, reggae, and particular reggae singers who were revolutionary in what they were doing was so important to me. It's something that I always go back to, because ultimately my first introduction to places across the diaspora are through music. And especially now with like all the stuff coming from Brazil and Spanish-speaking Caribbean and all these different places, it's a way of like getting in touch and getting to know your people, like the people around you. So that's a big deal for me.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. So we could carry on talking for ages,
Mm-hmm.
but I really love this. I just want to give you guys the opportunity now to say the last few words before we finish off. So any final thoughts or reflections you want to share before we say goodbye?
Did you know Winston Churchill imprisoned Barack Obama's grandfather, his Kenyan grandfather?
For some reason, I knew you would come up with a fact about Winston Churchill.
I don't like that. I can't say I don't like him because he's obviously. But yeah, did you know that? Like the president of the US and the former leader of the UK.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't
And read
know
Hidden Colors if you're watching this. Watch Hidden Colors.
Okay. I'm going to check it out. I'll
Yeah.
check it out. Kadeem, what about you? Any final thoughts or reflections you want to share?
Anyone experiencing like they're unheard, I feel like they should look at active resistance, look up what active resistance is, because you can direct those emotions to other places. And sometimes anxiety about the right thing could be a superpower. There's nothing wrong with knowing yourself and knowing your own limitations, and just be yourself. Just be yourself and be happy.
Oh, thank you. And Nirad?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Kadeem said, and just believe half of what you see and very little of what you hear, and keep it moving.
Keep it moving. I think that's the best thing to end on. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. We'll end it there. Thank you.